my name is Sterling Brown and I'm with IT Academy STEP Cambodia. What I'll be doing today is teaching you just how to use the basics of Photoshop so you get a little bit of an understanding and learn how to use the program. Now the first step before we do anything else is we have to download the program. And luckily that's pretty easy to do. Now one of the nice things about Photoshop is they actually make it easy to download a free trial of their software. This free trial is good for 30 days and you can do anything you want with it during that time. So to do this, we're going to go up here and click Menu, and then go over and select Photoshop right here. Then we go over to the free trial option. Now here, Photoshop is going to ask you a couple questions about why you want to download the software. So first is your skill level of Photoshop. We're going to click Beginner. Then it asks you what you are. For example, if you're a graphic designer or an IT professional, we're going to go down and select Student because you'll be learning Photoshop. Then it asks you why you're downloading Photoshop. We're going to select this and go to My Own Non-Professional Use. Now that we've selected all of these, we go down to sign up for an Adobe Id because in order to download this software, you need to have an account with adobe.com. So we click that. Now it asks you to put in your information, and this is going to be different for each one of you, so just put your first name here, your last name here, an email address, a password, your country, which will be Cambodia, and then your date of birth. Then you just select you've read the terms and agreement and privacy policy and hit sign up, and Adobe will let you download Photoshop for 30 days. There's so many things that you can do with Photoshop that the first time you use it, you're probably going to have no idea where to start. And when I first started using Photoshop, I didn't even know what did what, where to begin, or do anything like that. But it's actually not too bad because there are just a few simple things that you should understand, and those are very easy to learn. Once you have the basics, everything starts coming a lot easier. Alright everyone, so now hopefully you've downloaded Photoshop and you're ready to start to learn how to use it. So I've opened up Photoshop and you can see it looks pretty intimidating. Look at all the stuff we have. I mean, we have all of these tools down here, we have all these menu bars up here, all these different menus. We have all this stuff over here. So there's just a lot to work with, and if you're just starting out now, it might seem a little bit intimidating. But it's actually not too bad once you learn that there are just a couple basic things that all these things do. So the first thing we should do is open up an image. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and then I'm going to open up a picture of one of my favorite cars that we're going to edit. So let's hit Open. And there we go. Now, the first thing I like to do when I'm editing a picture is just kind of zoom in a little bit. And I do that because I'm on a Mac. I'm going to hit Command and then plus. And that zooms in. If you're on a PC, like a Windows PC, you would use Control plus. And if you want to zoom out, I use Command minus. If you're on a PC, you'd use Control minus. So let's just get a little bit closer here. Okay, so we have my picture. And now what are we going to do to change it? Well, we have a lot of options. This bar right here is all that we're going to be focusing on for this lesson. This is called your Toolbar, and this has a bunch of different tools that you can use to edit your photos. Now, these tools fall into 4 different categories. See, there's one here, that's one category, 2, 3, and 4. As you can see, it's separated by these lines here. So what are these 4 categories? Well, the first one is all about selecting parts of your image. The second one is all about patching parts of your image and making corrections to your image. The third one is all about vector graphics. We're not really going to go into that one today. And then the fourth one is about image measurements and getting more information on your image. And that's another one we're not really going to focus on today. Today, because we're just starting out Photoshop and just learning the basics, we're just going to go a little bit into selecting parts of your image and editing and correcting parts of your image. So let's see what we can do. The first thing we have is our selection part of our image. So what does this mean? Well, in Photoshop, selecting parts of your image to edit is a really important tool. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to go to my rectangular marquee tool and click it, and then I can just click and drag. And now you see this rectangle here with all the dots going around. That means that I've selected this part of the image. Now after I've selected it, I can use my mouse tool, which is right above it, to pick it up and move it around. Now, I don't really want to move around a big old chunk of my picture because it's going to look crazy if I just drop it there. I mean, I've kind of ruined my picture now. So if I make a big mistake and say I don't want to leave it there, I can hit Command Z, and that undoes anything that I just did. Command Z, or if you're on a Windows PC, that's Control Z. That is an automatic undo of whatever mistake you just made. And now say I don't want to have this part selected anymore. All you have to do is hit Command D, or if you're on a Windows PC, that would be Control D, and that tells Photoshop to unselect your selection. Now you have a bunch of different options of selection tools that you can use. See, I have my marquee tool here, and then if you right-click on it, it opens up these different options. So by default, it's a rectangular marquee tool, and you see it just makes like a square. If I right-click and select an elliptical marquee tool, that means I have a circle. So that would make it easier for circling round objects, like this headlight here. There we go. Now I can move around just a circle. So say if I wanted to replace this one, I'd go like that. Or maybe I want to circle this tire here. I go like that. So that just makes it easy to circle different types of shapes. Now, what happens if what you want to circle isn't really a rectangle or isn't really a circle? Well, that's where your lasso tool would come in. I can click that and say I want to get this goofy shape right here. I go and just trace it while holding down left click. And now I have a custom shape to move around. You can do any shape that you can think of with the lasso tool. Like, I'm just going to do a big old blob here. So I got this weird, crazy shape. But because I'm using the lasso tool, I can pretty much do whatever I want. All right, so let's take a look at this tool. This is called the Quick Selection tool. What this does is Photoshop will look at similar parts of the image as you trace it, which makes it really easy to trace like very complicated objects. So let's say I want to just get a general selection of the car here. I take my Quick Selection tool, and then I just start painting. And you see how it automatically starts branching out the selection? It kind of only goes where I tell it to, but it's making guesses as to what it should select. So I'm going all around here. I'm going to go down and try to grab the tire. Okay, so we're almost done. Just going to go around and get that part of the car, get the headlight. And finish it up like that. Okay. There. So now when you see I move it around, now it's not perfect because at the bottom you can see I got part of the street in, but this is all stuff that I could move part of this car, or move the image to, and then later I could erase out those parts to just have it be the car. So these are the main things that you're going to be using to select. We have your rectangular or elliptical marquee tool. So if I want to select a rectangle or maybe select a circle. Then I have my lasso tool, which lets me get crazy shapes. And then I have my quick select tool, which helps me by having Photoshop kind of guess what I'm looking at, and I can kind of paint it out. Now you'll probably notice that what I was selecting wasn't really perfect, and that's because I'm just kind of doing a quick overview right now. I'm just trying to show these basic tools and give you an idea of how they work. So don't worry if they're not perfect. There are always things that you can do afterwards to work them out. Now, one very important thing that I haven't covered yet, but that still has to do with the selection tool, is copying and pasting. This is a huge part of image editing, and I'm going to show you how it works. So say that I want to copy part of this image and move it somewhere else, but I want to keep it too. So remember before when I would select something, like say the logo here, I'd go like this, and then I would move it, but the problem is we've got a big old white spot where it used to be. So let's see how we can get around doing that. So you see here, I've selected that logo, but I don't want to have a white spot when I move it. So what I'm going to do, you can right-click on it, or I'm sorry, you can go up to Edit, and then Copy. Or you could also hit Command-C or Control-C if you're on a PC. And then what you can do is go Control-V. Or you can go up to Edit, Paste. Now what that did is it just made a copy of that, which I can move around. And because I'm not grabbing the original, I'm grabbing a copy, the white spot isn't going to be there, and I can really kind of put this wherever I think it'll fit. So now it would be kind of silly to just have a BMW logo right here, but just for showing you how to do it, I can move it over there. So you kind of get the idea. But I don't want it there, so I'm going to hit Control-Z to get rid of it. Okay, so now you should have a basic idea of how to select things, copy things, and paste things. But in case you don't, I'll just do a quick recap. So here are all your selection tools, and if you want to copy something, you'd select it, like that, and then hit Command-C for copy. That's Control-C if you're on a PC for Windows. And then to paste it, I'd go Command-V or Control-V if you're on Windows, and then I just move it around. All right, so now that you have a basic idea of that, let's go into the next area. This is all about image editing, like direct editing, and there are a bunch of tools here that we can use. So let's see what we have. We have this thing called your spot healing brush tool. Many have all these things: healing brush tool, patch tool, content aware move tool, red eye tool. Here we have the brush tool and pencil tool, color replacement tool, mixer brush tool. Here we have clone stamp tool and pattern stamp tool. Then we have history brush tool, art history brush tool. We have our eraser tool. We have a gradient tool. We have our blur tool, sharpen tool, or smudge tool. And then we have our dodge, burn, or sponge tool. So this looks like a lot to take in. So let's just kind of start basic. The most basic part of this section of tools would be the brush tool. And all this is just like a paintbrush. See, I've selected, my color that I've currently selected right now is black. As you can see down here, this shows you what colors you've selected. Now say I want a different color. I can click that and say I want something kind of blue to stand out. I'd go up here and select blue. Okay, so now I can go around and kind of paint blue here. So you can really choose any color you want. Now, how do I change the settings of this brush? Well, the great thing about Photoshop is every single tool has its own menu up here. So when I click brush, I have all of these options I can do. Right here, this shows your brush size. So say I want a really big brush, I move this all the way up. And now I have well, this brush is really big. See what happens? It's all blue, so I'm going to undo that. So let's go for just a more realistic size. Let's do something like this. There we go. All right, so you can see I can change the size. Now, there were some other things here too. there was something called hardness, which right now is set at 0%. So what do you think hardness does? Well, it's at 0 right now, and if we move it all the way to 100, you see the difference between what I just painted and what I'm painting right now. A really low hardness means that your brush is kind of soft and fuzzy at the edges, where if you have really high hardness, you can see that there's a very crisp edge. Then opacity, this just means how see-through your paint is. So if I move it way down, like to 20% opacity, that means that I can paint over things, but it just kind of makes them a little bit blue and you can see through it, almost like you're looking through blue glass or something. So that's the basic things you can do with paintbrush. Now remember, there were other things in here too. A big one is the pencil tool, so we'll select that. And let's change that to black. Remember, I change colors by going down to this area, and I click the main color, and then I can change it in this menu. Okay, so now I have a black pencil. A pencil is a lot like a paintbrush, except for it's just really, really thin. So this is for doing more precise work. You can also change the size of it though. Like say I want to get it big. It's a lot like the paintbrush, but usually you do it for more fine things. I can even change the hardness of it. Although because it's a pencil, it doesn't have nearly the same effect that the paintbrush tool does. Okay, so my picture's getting pretty messed up as I've been showing you how to use the art brush and the pencil. So how are we going to clean that up? Well, there's a wonderful, wonderful tool, and it's called the History Brush tool. I love this tool because I make a lot of mistakes in Photoshop, and this helps me out a lot. So what does this tool do? Well, it just brings your picture back to how it originally was. See that? I'm erasing through all of this junk that I made, and you can see the original behind it. But I don't want to take all this time with a little brush, so I'm going to go and change the size of my brush and get it really big and put the hardness way up there too. So as you can see, I've got a really big brush, and it's just taking care of all of that junk. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Now, how do you make your brush bigger without going to this menu? It's actually really easy. You just use your bracket tools, or your bracket keys, excuse me, on your keyboard. So I'm going to use the right bracket to make it really big. And there we go, right back to the original image. So this is a really great tool. Now, as you notice, there's the History Brush tool and the Art History Brush tool. So what's the difference? Well, I'll show you. If I choose the Art History Brush tool, what this does is it makes it kind of look like an old-time painting. This is really more of just an effect to use. It's kind of fun, but it's not super useful, at least for this level. So it's kind of neat, but I'd recommend just sticking to the other one. Alright, so let's look at some of the other tools we have here. This one's called the Spot Healing Brush tool. I'm going to cover this more in depth in my next Photoshop tutorial, where I'm going to correct some blemishes on a person's face. But I'll just give you a short idea of what it does. So I'm going to zoom back in with Command plus and show you what a Spot Healing Brush tool does. Mainly this just takes care of any mistakes in a picture. So say I don't like this reflection here. I can just kind of blot it out with that. I don't like this, let's say. Just kind of get rid of it. So this is a useful tool just for getting rid of little mistakes in a picture that you don't want there. Like, say I don't want some of these reflections. Now it's not perfect, so I wouldn't recommend using this one too much. It's more for correcting things on a person's face, so we're not really going to use it that much here. Something that I do like a lot that we can use here is something called the Patch tool. I'm going to click this. Let's see what this does. Well, a patch tool is a really neat tool, and it replaces part of an image with something else. So let's say I don't want this logo to be here. What I can do is I circle it with the patch tool, just carefully getting all around it. There we go. And now I can drag this, and I tell Photoshop, okay, instead of that logo being there, I want this texture to be here. And I let go, and it just takes care of it completely. It's really cool. This is also something that is a little bit more useful to be doing when you're correcting somebody's face and want them to make it look better, like maybe they have a scar or something and you want to cover it up. This is a very useful tool for doing that. You can also do just some absolutely crazy things with this. You just kind of get the idea. Now I don't want that to be selected anymore, so I hit Command D. If you're on a Windows PC, that's Control D. Remember, that's your deselect. So these patch tools right here, these are really helpful for improving people's faces. They're not super useful for doing something like making a car look cool. So let's look at what else we could do. Here's something called the Clone Stamp tool. What this does is it tells Photoshop that you want to replace part of an image with something else. It's actually pretty similar to the tool that we just used, except for instead of blending the image to fit it in, it just takes exactly what you selected and puts it somewhere else. So let's say I want to replace this headlight with this headlight. Well, first thing I have to do is tell Photoshop what I want to be replacing from. So we hit the Option Alt key, and you get this little thing. Click right in the center. So now Photoshop knows to take from that headlight. So you can see here I have a ghost image of that. And then I just start painting over. And you can see it replaces it, like that. Now, of course, it's replacing all the stuff around it. And why is that? Well, it's because I have a really low hardness set on my brush. Remember how on a paintbrush, with low hardness, you kind of got those fuzzy edges, like you can see here? I'm going to increase my hardness all the way. And now you can see I get a really crisp image. I'm just going to decrease my size using my bracket key. And there you go. So you can just go around replacing all sorts of stuff. Say I want this license plate to be up here in the sky. That's just what I want today. There you go. This is more useful for doing really small corrections. Like say, I don't like the look of these reflections here. Oops. So I'm going to go hit Alt and select from over here. And I'm going to shrink my brush down a bit. And I'm going to decrease the hardness just to make things look smoother. Remember, hardness is how smooth your picture looks, how smooth your brush is. So I'm just going to go over here and just kind of start painting out those reflections. So I don't like these either. So I'm going to take from this part of the picture and then just kind of paint over them. You see the clone stamp tool, you tell Photoshop, all right, where should I clone from? And then you just go from there. Very useful tool. Now the eraser tool is pretty obvious what it does. It just, chose the wrong tool there. Okay, the eraser tool, all it does is just erase parts of an image. Pretty self-explanatory. This is really useful when you have images layered on top of each other, because when you erase an image that's on top of another image, it shows the bottom image. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. So let's undo that. Remember copying and pasting things? I'm going to copy and paste this headlight here. So I select it, then I hit Control-C to copy, Command-C, because I'm on a Mac, it would be Control-C if you're on a PC. And then to paste it, I hit Command-V, that'd be Control-V if you're on a Windows PC. And then let's just drag it over here. Okay, so I've put it here, and let's say I want there to be a hole in the middle. I take my eraser, and then I just erase in the middle. And you can see that because this is on top of the image. When I erase it, you see what's beneath the image. You see that? Because I copied that headlight and then pasted it on top of the image. Now whatever I erase in this lets you see through to whatever's beneath it. And because the car's beneath it, that's what you see. There you go. So now I have kind of this little donut. So I think I'll just get rid of that. Okay, so what else am I going to show you today? Well, here are these cool tools. There's the Blur, Sharpen, Smudge tool, and then there's the Dodge, Burn, Sponge tool. Let's cover these first. So the Blur tool, you guessed it, blurs things. So let's do an example down on this license plate. So when I take a blur tool and I just start going over it, you can see that the letters and numbers get harder and harder to read because they're getting really blurry. And this is a really cool effect that you can do maybe if you kind of want to even some things out. Like if you're trying to edit somebody's face and maybe they have uneven skin, you can use this to kind of blur out any imperfections that they might have. As you can see here, I'm getting kind of a cool image on the license plate. The letters and numbers are getting all blurred out. Let's say I want to blur the headlights up. I just want to make them seem kind of soft and mysterious. That's what the blur tool does. It blurs things. But I don't want to do that because I'm going to be showing you some other examples. We also have something called the Sharpen Tool. Now this is a tool, it's kind of tough to get right because it's a very finicky tool, but basically it just sharpens the edges of things. Now you'll notice if I start sharpening too far, it just makes the edges a little bit more obvious, but it's very easy to go overboard on this, and you kind of see now, as I'm going more and more, it's looking weirder and weirder because it's really bringing out the pixels of the image. So the Sharpen tool you have to be careful with. It can make the edges of something sharper, but it can also make it look ridiculous, like how it does look now. So I'm going to undo that. And now we have the Smudge tool. Now this tool is a lot of fun. This is just like if this were a painting and you took your finger and just started wiping it all over. So I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller by hitting the left bracket, and I'll show you what this does. See, it's just like I'm taking my finger and wiping it on a painting, and just smudging everything. You can get some really cool effects with this. This is great if you're just trying to blend something together, like say I'm trying to make these reflections a little bit smoother. I'll just try to blend it out. Some of the stuff up here. I want to add like a wavy effect to it. And then you can just do some crazy things, like if I made the brush really, really big, you can kind of smudge whole parts of the picture. Okay, so let's zoom out, hitting Command minus, and you can see it's a pretty big change. So that's what the Smudge tool does. All right, so we have one more tool in this area that we're going to check out, and then we're going to be finished with this tutorial. So what is it? Well, this tool is actually three tools. There's the Dodge tool, the Burn tool, and the Sponge tool. So let's take the Dodge tool. What this does, this actually lightens your image. So if you have a part of the image, let's say I think my front is a little bit dark and I want to brighten it up. So I take the Dodge tool, and I can just kind of go in here and really lighten things up. Also, maybe I think that the windshield area is a little dark. Let's go in there and brighten it up. So So that's what the dodge tool does. It just brightens areas of the painting. Now the burn tool does the exact opposite of the dodge tool, which is it darkens the image. So let's zoom in, and let's say I want this part to be darker. So I'm going to go in with the dodge tool and just kind of darken things up. These tools are pretty subtle, but you can get some really cool effects with them. You see, I just went for my history brush tool to get rid of everything, just to make it a little bit more obvious. What the burn tool especially does is it takes darker parts of the image and makes them even darker. Like you can see this line here, which was originally a little bit dark in the first photo, is getting really dark now. So you see the difference? Because it was just a little bit darker, so this tool makes it a lot darker. All right, so last tool is the sponge tool. Now what this tool does is it actually removes color from the image. You can kind of see here that the car is getting less orange. So once I go over the whole thing, let's zoom out. You can really see that compared to how it looked before, it takes away a lot of the color. So now you should understand selecting and moving things, copying and pasting things, which are all part of the selection menu, and then some basic photo editing things like drawing on your picture with a pencil or paintbrush tool, patching things or doing spot healing things with the spot healing brush tool and the patch tool, replacing things with the clone stamp tool where you tell Photoshop to replace from one area to another, how to revert parts of your picture by using the history brush tool, erasing your image or parts of your image by using the eraser tool, smudging and blurring or sharpening your image with the blur sharpen smudge tool, and finally lightening, darkening, and removing the color from parts of your image with the dodge burn sponge tool. Now of course there are always different ways to do things in Photoshop, and a lot of what I just showed you, there are actually easier ways to do it, but it's a little bit more complicated to explain. But hopefully now you have a basic general understanding of how Photoshop works and some of the things that you can do with it. So I really hope that you take this video and you go and practice on your own time and be creative and just have a lot of fun, because that's the best way to learn Photoshop, is to just take some simple, basic tools and just start editing photos, and you'll discover so much on your own. But keep on watching these videos, and we really hope you learn a lot. Now there's one more thing that we're going to do. Let's say that you really liked what you finished with. I'll just sign my name down here at the bottom. So put my initials, S, B with the paintbrush, because I'm happy with what I did today, and I want to save this. So I'm going to go up to Photoshop, File, Save As, and we're going to call this lesson1.jpg. Now there are all these different things we can save it as. Really the only two you have to worry about is Photoshop, because that saves it as the whole project, so all your edits are still there, and JPEG. And what JPEG does is it takes everything that you did and smushes it into one copy, and that is mainly what you're going to do once you finish something. Save it as a JPEG. All right, so I'm going to hit save, hit OK, and I just saved my picture. So that was the first bit of our lesson. I really hope that you learned something. Photoshop, the great thing about it is the more you practice, the better you get. And now that you understand some of the basics, you can really just go in and start editing any picture that you want. It doesn't have to look great, but you should just enjoy yourself and make sure that you're learning a lot. We hope to see you in the next lesson, so stick around. By now you should have a basic understanding of the Photoshop fundamentals, but all we really did was kind of mess around with the picture, so how can we do something useful? Well, in this next tutorial, we're going to learn how professionals edit photos of celebrities to make them look perfect. Almost every time that you open up a magazine or look at celebrity photos online, they're going to have their faces edited in Photoshop. This is because everybody has acne or redness on their face, but celebrities will hire people to edit it out for them. This is all done in Photoshop, and it's one of the biggest reasons why people use the program. A lot of people even have their entire careers based on editing out all of these imperfections and making people look beautiful. So this is actually a pretty simple procedure, so let's look at some basic ways that we can do this just on your own. So here we're going to explore some of the easy ways to improve somebody's picture in Photoshop. As you can see here, we have a photograph of a young man who has a little bit of acne in his lower face and just a little bit of spots up here and down here. So we're going to be using a couple basic tools, the spot healing brush tool and the patch tool. So first thing I'm going to do is zoom into his face a little bit. I'm going to do that by holding Command and then plus. So now we have a closer up view of his face, which makes it easier to look at what we're going to be doing. Now I'm going to grab the Spot Healing Brush tool. What this tool does is it repairs any redness or anything that isn't like the background. So let's just show you how that works as an example. I'm just going to paint over that little bit of acne, and you can see it's completely gone. It's very simple. Photoshop is a very advanced program, and things like these are very easy to do with it. So all I have to do now is go around to each little bit of redness I see and just paint it out, and Photoshop takes care of the rest for me. What I'm going to do is actually make my brush a little bit bigger, just so I get some better coverage. I do that by hitting the right bracket, that makes the brush bigger. Left bracket makes it smaller. So I'm going to make it a little bigger. That will just help smooth everything out. Now I'm going to go up to his forehead and take care of a few of these spots. You can even do it not on skin, like in here you can see there's a little bit of blackness in his hair that I don't like. Photoshop automatically looks around the brush and fills it in with what's surrounding it. And now he had a few spots on his neck too, so we'll just take care of those. Okay, this looks pretty good. Let's just compare to how it was before and see how we're doing. I'm going to zoom out with Command minus, and we're going to compare these two. So this is the edited version we have, and that's how it looked before. So as you can see, this only took me around 4 or 5 minutes to do, and already he looks a lot better. There's another thing I want to take care of though. We're going to zoom in again, that's Command plus. And you see here he has, oops, I made a mistake right there. I'm going to hit Command Z, which takes care of the mistake. So you can see here, he has some hair in between his eyebrows, which I want to get rid of, just because I'm trying to make him look as good as possible. We're just going to take that out of there. Now, the problem is if we did that with the same spot healing tool, it looks okay, but as you can see, it's a little bit blurry. You can kind of see some blur, and it just doesn't look too good. So let's undo that with Command Z, and I'm going to go over here, right-click on this tool, and then go down to the Patch tool. And this is a very useful tool for replacing things you don't like with something else. So what I'm going to do here is circle these hairs, and then I'm going to tell Photoshop to look at a different part of the image to replace it with. So first thing I have to do is kind of circle these guys like that. So now I've circled these hairs. I'm going to click and drag, probably just up here, and Photoshop is going to see that I want to replace the hairs with this kind of skin up here. So I let it go, and it automatically corrects the color, and I think that looks really good. Most people probably wouldn't even know that this was edited. So we're going to zoom out, and let's compare the two. So we have this versus that. And that's just one way to do really easy stuff in Photoshop to make a face look a lot better, a lot cleaner, and just a lot more appealing. So what we're going to do now is go to File and Save As. Now, there are many different things you can save in Photoshop. There are just a ton of different picture formats, but we're going to look at two. First one is format in Photoshop file. This means that I can come back to this and I'll still have my layers, which I'm going to go into more in a different video because layers are a little bit complicated. But basically saving this as a format of Photoshop means I can come back and continue working on the same piece. If I save this as a JPEG, that means it just it'll squish all the layers together into just one layer, and it means I can't go back and continue working on it the same way that it was. So we're going to save it as a JPEG, it's also a much smaller file format and is easier to share on social media or on email. So I'm going to hit save. Let's hit OK. And there we go. So that is how you edit acne out of Photoshop and make someone look like how they would in a magazine. Thanks for watching.